I am Simon R. Thomas of Atlantic Wisdom, and welcome to Exploring Ancient Bronze Age Networks. In the first video of this series, I explored the idea that the Irish druids had connections to the Taoists in China. This video will discuss the timeline of these events and the historical and scientific evidence that highlights the connections through multiple societies across the continent. When Alexander the Great of Macedonia in northern Greece met the Celtic tribes 2,400 years ago, he was hoping they would fear him because of his reputation. But he was surprised that the Celts were more concerned with the sky falling in on their heads. Was this a fear, an ancient superstition, a belief in the vengeful gods, or was it based in tribal memory from experiences told through stories around the winter fires? The answer is both. At the beginning of the Neolithic age in Ireland in 4350 BCE, the Mesolith hunter-gatherers were starting to leave the island due to a change in climate and the dying back of two of their main food sources, the elm and hazel trees. The climatic changes introduced agricultural practices beginning in Ferreter's Cove in North Kerry, where the first archaeological evidence of domestic animals has been found dating to this period. As the climate change progressed, the agriculture and social practices of the early agrarian societies changed from forest farming, the growing of crops within the forest, to extensive land clearance for cattle, which is evident at Cadia Fields in Mayo, dated at 3500 BCE. Within this 850 years, the social changes induced by climate change included the wise women or the shaman of the hunter-gatherer tribes turning their attention to honouring the ancestors and the earth with complex construction of stone tombs. This started in Carrowmore in County Sligo in 3800 BCE, with the court tombs, which progressed to larger dolmen and passage tombs throughout the country. The pinnacle of these construction projects, and the first evidence of complex ritual practices and a religious shamanic order, was the 30-year construction of Newgrange, which has been carbon dated to around 3200 BC. As Newgrange was being built, or the main reason for Newgrange being built, there was a global disaster event known as the Great Shock of 3250 BCE. The shock added strain to the climate changes, which had intensified from 3500 BCE. The global shock is thought to be a comet strike in the Pacific, or a sizable celestial object passing close by to the Earth. The sky fell in. The global shock is recorded in the lack of growth in oak trees in Ireland, high sulfate and methane levels in the ice cores in Greenland. There is also evidence of mass coolings across the Americas and the Pacific, and global flooding events of coastal and river communities across the Mediterranean, the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. And this wasn't the end of the problems for the ancient Irish. Within a generation, in 3190 BCE, the Icelandic volcano Hekla III erupted, darkening the skies, resulting in the scaling back of megalithic construction in Ireland and a probable migration from the country. Suppose you've watched the first video of this series. In that case, you will have seen the Chinese believe that Irish druids or shamanic priests brought civilization, agriculture and metalwork to the Chinese after the Great Flood. These druids or shaman were called the Shining Ones, as they were tall, with fair or red hair, and were wearing white robes and draped in gold. At the time of the Great Shock, there is evidence of a 15-foot silt deposit up through the Yangtze River in western China, indicating a massive tidal surge and catastrophic flooding. So is there a connection placing Irish druids or shaman migrating eastwards to China to help the Chinese during or after the Great Shock event? If you use the Newgrange passage tomb as a benchmark of society, then yes, there is. Newgrange is on the River Boyne, which can be translated from the ancient Irish and Indo-European language as the White Cow River. The Neolithic complex at Newgrange can be translated as the womb or the palace of the White Cow. The shape of Newgrange is of cow horns with a circle or disc rising out of the horns. The White Cow is associated with a female sky deity, and the circle or disc is an earth god deity. On the winter solstice, the changing point between the light and the dark half of the year, the rising sun rays enter the tomb from the southeast and shine on a triple spiral carved into the rock at the back of the passage in the northwest. This is believed to be a representation of a cow sky deity entering the earth and connecting with or mating with the earth god, a bull. The bull is a symbol of fertility, and it is a significant theme in Irish mythology. For example, the conflicts over the white and brown bull in the cattle raids of Cooley. In ancient Egypt, the first recording of a bull fertility god was Apis, who also had a disc over his horns in 3100 BCE, 150 years after the shock and construction of Newgrange, and within a generation of the Hekla III eruption. There are early depictions of a cow goddess in pre-dynastic Egypt during the 4th millennium, just as the Irish were establishing their Neolithic culture. This hints at a connection between the Irish and the Egyptian cultures. The cow goddess of the 4th millennium is the sky goddess Hathor, and Apis is her son. Apis is Egypt's first god, or one of the first animals given deity status. 100 years earlier, across the Mediterranean in Crete, the Minoan civilization had begun to rise. Metallurgy reached Crete in 3200 BCE with the associated bull worship and the beginning of the King Minos stories, the Minotaur, and the labyrinth of the underworld. Northwest of the Black Sea, the Cucutini culture has zoomorphic characters in pottery and bull symbolism which have a strong resemblance to pottery patterns of the Marja Yao and Yangshao pottery of northwestern China at the same date, 3000 BCE. Kyrgyzstan, which borders northwestern China, is home to the Kyrgyz nomadic culture. The Kyrgyz nomads are genetically distinct as they have red hair and white faces, and according to their mythology, they are the descendants of a mating in a mountain cave between a god and a cow. In the indigenous Tibetan shamanic religion called Bon, which is similar to the Irish goddess Bon, the horn and disc motive are used in a practice linked to the bardo, between death and rebirth process. This is known as the union of the sun and the moon. The sun and moon symbol are also used on top of stupas in Tibet and China. The two symbols are associated with wind and space in the five-element philosophy of the area. The five-element philosophy can be found in traditions from Ireland all the way across the continent to Japan. The directions associated with wind and space in the five elements is the southeast and the northwest, the same as the sunrise and the triple spiral on the winter solstice at Newgrange. In Taoism, China's shamanic religion, which is said to originate in northern Siberia, there is a horse-headed god and an ox-headed god, and they are the guardians of the underworld. Also, there is a footwork pattern in Taoist shamanic practices that connects the shaman to the earth. The pattern is 3 spirals. The 3 spirals are connected to heaven by another foot pattern, a zigzag pattern representing the Big Dipper star constellation. This pattern is stepped outside the 3 spirals and then inside the center of the spiral pattern. There is a 1300-year progressive climate change event which changes Ireland from a hunter-gathering society to a farming society. The climate change intensifies at 3500 BCE across the northern hemisphere. In 3250 BCE, a possible comet strike in the Pacific causes global changes, known as the Great Shock. The comet occurs at the start of or during the construction of the Newgrange passage tomb in Ireland, which is dedicated to the union of the sky cow goddess and the earth god, represented by the shape of cow horns and a circle. Soon after the catastrophe, there is a historical record of bull and cow worship stretching from Ireland through the Mediterranean to Tibet and the Yangtze River. We also know from the Chinese legends that Irish or Aryan druids, shamans, called the Shining Ones, helped rebuild the flood-ruined country. Also in the Yellow Emperor's legends, we know that the Emperor gathered all of the shamanistic and medicine practice from northern and western China and wrote them down in the Yellow Emperor's medicine classic in 2500 BCE. His leading advisors at this time were female shamans who were called the Wu Yi. Female shamans were the mainstay of Siberian and Chinese shamanism until 1100 BCE. They were the wise women of the time. Not everyone will agree with his theory of climate change migration. So if there is no migration in 3200 BCE, what is there? There is a loose network of white or fair-skinned people with blonde or red hair whose tribal female shaman worship sky and earth cow or bull deities, reaching from northwestern China, across Asia to the Mediterranean, and up the Atlantic seaboard to Ireland. So how did the female shaman of the East become the male druid caste of the West? I'll discuss that in the next installment of the series in the next video. Thank you for listening.